It all happened in an instant. Sabo and Cobra were trying to escape from Pangaea Castle when they were hit by a strange arrow. This wasn't just any attack, but it came directly from Imu, making it the first time we'd seen the main villain of One Piece in action. Exactly 50 chapters after this scene, we see this exact same type of arrow again, but this time, it came from the character of Gunko. Gunko is a god's knight we still know very little about, where unlike all the other knights, she's the only one whose family name remains hidden. Every other god's knight has been introduced with the story revealing which celestial dragon family they belong to, except for Gunko. This is a very odd thing for the story to keep a secret, but this could be because Gunko's family name would spoil literally everything about her. What we have come to know in the final saga is that one of the 20 founding kings who created the world government 800 years ago went by the particular name of Saint Nerona Imu. If Ivankov is correct in his speculation, this is the same Imu who to this day rules the government, which brings me back to Gunko, the only god's knight whose family name is conveniently hidden. It is possible that we are being set up for a huge plot twist in the Elbaf arc, where the main villain of One Piece may literally already be on the island, and after all these years, is finally going to meet Luffy. It is not just the fact that we don't know her family name, but Gunko is also very likely not the real name of this character. Gunko is actually one of the most unique names in all of One Piece, where in the original Japanese, it is written in the kanji script. This is extremely rare, as One Piece almost never writes character names like this, where over 99% of the characters have their names written in the katakana script. The only characters who've in the past ever had their names written in kanji are mainly very Japanese-centric characters like those from Wano country. While Gunko's name being written like this could be a nod to her character design making her look like a stereotypical Japanese sukeban, there is also an alternative theory. Gunko may in fact be a code name. One of the other rare exceptions of a One Piece character's name being written in kanji is when the character is actually using an alias, and this is especially true for characters from the world government. With literally all of the admirals, each of them uses a fake name written in kanji, where names like Akainu, Aokichi and Kizaru are not their real names, but instead code names. Aside from Gunko possibly using a fake name, she is also an extremely secretive person in general. The other gods knights seemingly know next to nothing about her. Somers keeps trying to get to know Gunko better by asking her questions throughout the arc, but she is very resistant to telling him anything. Gunko also literally hides her own face under a mask, and does this even when there aren't any enemies around. Let's for a minute take this all in. Covering your face, not using your real name, and not telling others about your life are not new things in One Piece, but they pretty much always mean one thing. This character is not who they claim to be, but Gunko might just be the holder of the most secret identity in the whole story. One of the most surprising things in this arc was when Gunko was revealed to be a fan of Brook's music, where she apparently frequently listens to his song, New World. Gunko's interpretation of the song is however not the jolly pirate theme Brook had probably intended for it, but instead something much darker. Gunko literally believes that the world is simply meant to end one day, and it is an event she's very much looking forward to. What is incredibly noteworthy here is that this is not a belief shared by the other celestial dragons. When hearing about her taste in music, Saint Summer simply laughs at Gunko, thinking that the world is fine as it is. We've also previously been revealed that most of the celestial dragons do not even know anything about the Void Century, let alone the other secrets of the world. Yet, we know that the person at the very top of the world government has the exact same desire as Gunko, where they both want to see the end of the world. Despite these differences, Gunko also still very much acts like the other celestial dragons. With every person she meets on Elbaf, Gunko immediately treats them as being beneath her, seeing herself as a god, and everyone else as nothing but insects. This is also how Imu himself is like. The first time we ever hear Imu speak, he acts incredibly superior to Cobra, and he later does this to the five elders themselves. What we've also found out about Imu in his few scenes in the story is that despite him being someone who lives in the shadows, if provoked, Imu is actually an incredibly aggressive person. Whenever things don't go his way, Imu goes from 0 to 100 and lashes out in blind rage. After Saint Saturn's failure on Egghead, Imo immediately decided to personally kill him. Despite Saturn having served him for hundreds of years, and despite there being several witnesses present, Imo simply kills him on the spot. This was clearly not a strategic move, but something he did out of emotion. Imo even decided to berate Saturn in his final moments, just to vent out his own anger. While we've only known her for a few chapters, Gunko has already shown that she shares Imo's relationship with anger. In almost every other scene with her, Gunko loses it, and just like Imo, vents out her anger on others. Like Imo, she is also very often violent about this. We saw this in both her first scene in the Giant's Castle, then again when she was persuading Loki, when she interacted with the Straw Hats, and even in her interactions with the other gods' knights. Beyond Gunko and Imo both having a short fuse, they also have another noteworthy thing in common, which is their complete lack of empathy for children. When the gods' knights try to kidnap Elbaf's children, Gunko is extremely callous about the operation. When some of the children are almost burned alive while being escorted out of the country, Gunko says that she is perfectly fine with this outcome. While we've yet to see Imo himself have any scenes harming kids, his organization, the world government, is, to put it very dramatically, an empire built on the bones of children. Government throughout the story has been perfectly fine with killing children, enslaving children, making children into their soldiers, or even performing experiments on children. The government doesn't even always do this for simple gain, but often just for pure entertainment. The world government's treatment of kids is up there as the most evil things in One Piece. I think it could also be a deliberate choice from the story. Imo is someone who's potentially lived for hundreds of years, so it is possible that he has completely forgotten what it was like to be a child, and that to him, kids are just a resource to be used just like everyone else under the government's thumb. It's also very noteworthy that Imo's antithesis is Nika. Both Joy Boy and Luffy, and even Roger himself, are many times noted to be childlike figures, where they see the world through the pure and innocent perspective of a child, and want it to be a world of dreams. I think the best take I have personally seen about the twist of Luffy being Nika came from the legendary YouTuber Uzumaki Khan, where he said that Gear 5 was really just a reflection of how Luffy saw the world, with the mind of a child.
Luffy's imagination from episode chapter 1 was childlike. So him awakening a devil fruit that makes him more childlike is probably the best story writing ever.
Fittingly, this is also seemingly what Imo fears the most in the world, as Joy Boy's return left him completely shaken. Not too long after this scene, Gunko also has a scene where she reveals that what she too fears the most in this world is Nika. I've now laid out quite a lot of evidence in this video, and I think it's time I try to put the pieces together. Gunko very simply has an incredible amount of things in common with Imo, to the point where it is impossible to ignore. They both want to see the end of the world. Their personalities are incredibly similar, their abilities are incredibly similar, and even their greatest fears are exactly the same. There's also the very strange thing where the story, for whatever reason, keeps hiding Gunko's celestial dragon family, which is incredibly suspicious. There's also other evidence I haven't even mentioned yet. Imo actually has a surprisingly slender and feminine figure, which is not too different from Gunko's in height or build. Other than Imo being called King, his gender has never been confirmed in the story, and this is once again something One Piece has many times toyed around with in the past, before revealing a character's true identity. The only reason why I've personally called Imo as him throughout this video is just out of convenience, and there is still a good chance that Imo is in fact female. This is also the part where I should probably bring up one of the most random scenes in Elbaf. In one chapter, the over 400-year-old Jarl out of nowhere brings up the fact that he likes older women. This scene almost comes across as filler, yet the chapter with this scene was literally titled Older Women. As crazy as it may sound, in the Elbaf arc, Gunko is very literally the only female character who has not yet been confirmed to be younger than Jarl. Jarl is already confirmed to be older than all the other giants, and we are well aware that he is way older than Nami and Robin, leaving Gunko as the only female present who is not yet confirmed to be younger than Jarl. Very conveniently, When the Gods Knights also did their broadcast to the entire island, Saint Somers was the one speaking, meaning that if there is a connection between the two, Jarl did not get to know that Gunko is also on Elbaf. Even though this theory may at first sound crazy, I think it's at this point undeniable that there's a shocking amount of evidence behind the idea. But I still haven't talked about what I think is the biggest point that indicates that a huge twist regarding Gunko is coming. Gunko's character has so far been a huge outlier to the entire story, and she very much breaks many of the oldest conventions of the manga. Out of nowhere, the Elbaf arc introduces this entirely new character to the series, and then we simply keep getting more and more focus with her every passing chapter. I think a lot of fans, myself included, originally thought Gunko would just end up being a sidekick to Shamrock. Yet as it turns out, Shamrock was in fact a red herring, and Gunko is a far more important character than even him in this arc. This happening in Elbaf of all arcs is also what makes it even stranger. The story has spent literal decades building this arc up, far more than even other huge arcs like Wano. Yet when the crew finally reaches this fabled land of the giants, instead of the giants themselves, this random new character with no prior build-up ends up hogging all of the spotlight. I haven't actually counted this, but I'm pretty sure that at this point, Gunko has had more panel time than even Loki, despite Loki having been a character built up for years before the arc even started. You could say that this is all because Gunko is the villain, but this is actually another big point why she's likely not who she claims to be. Just looking at the past few arcs of the story, the arc villains have very consistently been massive figures who've been built up for years, like the Yonko, the Admirals, or the Five Elders. There's however none of this build-up or gravitas behind Gunko's character. We'd never heard of her before the arc, and there should honestly be well over a dozen world government characters more important than her, if she's indeed just a random God's Knight. To me, Gunko getting this much focus in Elbaf is simply extremely strange. It is honestly the equivalent of someone like Sasaki having out of nowhere become a major player in the Wano arc. Yet, there could be a very good reason why the story is doing all of this. Elbaf could very well exceed everyone's expectations by being the arc where Luffy finally comes face to face with the ultimate big bad of the entire story. There's also a good reason why Imo would now of all times decide to face Luffy. In Saturn's death scene at the end of Egghead, Imo reveals that he has now literally started to see Luffy as Joy Boy, and the very reason why he killed Saturn was just because he had let Luffy escape. Clearly, Imo now wants Luffy dead, but he's after Egghead left in a situation where his greatest servants have all just failed him. While Imo has remained in the shadows for centuries, he seemingly in the distant past ventured out into the world, back when Joy Boy was around, which is exactly the situation he now finds himself in. Joy Boy's return could finally be the thing that pushes Imo out of the shadows, where he might only trust himself to eliminate him. Shamrock was seemingly already going to Elbaf before the arc even started, which means that Imo could have seen this as his perfect opportunity, where he could travel with Shamrock to the island under the fake identity of Gunko. Officially, the mission is to subjugate the giants, but in reality, Imo would be on his own mission to kill Luffy. Imo is incredibly secretive, to a point where even many of the celestial dragons do not seemingly know of his existence, yet we already have some hints that Imo does indeed mingle among his followers. Garling's words when he ascended to the rank of Elder to me heavily imply that he had been contacted by Imo, and that the two already had some relationship before this moment. This could essentially be the purpose of the Gunko persona. Imo could use it as a disguise, to essentially play undercover boss, secretly keeping tabs on the celestial dragons. One Piece has a lot of times had characters assume these kinds of false identities, but what is very interesting is that one of the biggest examples of this in the story is a character who has a confirmed connection with Imo. When we were first introduced to Vivi, she had infiltrated Baroque works without revealing her true identity, and even the other agents with the exception of Igaram didn't know who she truly was. There's clearly something going on between Imo and Vivi, and One Piece has always been in a habit of drawing these kinds of parallels between important characters. What I also think makes this even more noteworthy is how the Elbaf arc has been written so far. There's actually already been a ton of references to the Alabasta saga in Elbaf, not only with literal one-to-one pages, but with the style of the storytelling as a whole. this could very well extend to Gunko, and the story bringing back this old device of false identities. One final thing I'd like to discuss is the very high likelihood of Imu becoming an active player in the story and meeting the Straw Hats long before his final battle. This is simply because almost all of One Piece's biggest villains are written like this. Just like Imu, One Piece had also spent years building up villains like Crocodile, Doflamingo, Kaido, and almost every other big arc baddie. For a long time, these characters were distant figures with no real connection to Luffy, but when it finally came time for them to play their role in the story, things very quickly got personal. Way before they were eventually defeated, these villains were all given a ton of scenes building up the personal conflict between them and the main characters. This is however something Imu is still very much lacking, even though we are already in the final saga. Imu has barely interacted with any of the story's characters, and the personal stakes with him compared to other final saga bosses, like Blackbeard and Akainu, are at this point non-existent. If Imu is to be the big main villain Luffy has to defeat in the future, the story will likely soon start developing a personal conflict between them, and this would all start on Elbaf. Still, I think I have to come clean. While Imu being Gunko is a fun theory, perhaps shockingly, I do not actually personally believe it. There is one big thing in the manga that I think makes this idea incredibly unlikely to happen, and it is ironically the thing I used as the hook of this video. This is very simply Gunko's devil fruit, the arrow fruit. While there could still be a connection with it and the arrow ability we saw at the reverie, the chances of this, of all things, being Imu's fruit are in my opinion extremely small. Imu is for all intents and purposes a mythical demigod ruling over an entire planet. He is the man who fought Joy Boy in the war that lasted for 100 years. He is the one who originally sank the entire world under the seas, and naturally, he is the potential main villain of the whole story. Even though there's a certain humor to it, I simply cannot believe the ability of this kind of a character would be something as basic as arrows. Just for comparison, Luffy's less important enemies include a man who turns himself into a dragon, a man who is literally made out of light, and a man who has the power to destroy the world. We also have already seen Imu transforming into some sort of gigantic creature in his throne room, and while the arrow fruit is very malleable, I think it is very unlikely it could actually do something like this. It's also pretty much impossible for Imu to have eaten multiple devil fruits. The 5 elders in the pre-time skip say that Blackbeard is the only person in history who has eaten multiple fruits. I personally find it incredibly hard to believe that Imu would keep something like the fact that he has multiple fruits hidden from the elders, when he's willing to share so many other secrets with them. Granted, it is still possible that Imu's transformation is in fact not a devil fruit ability, since there are a lot of hints in the story that the elders' transformations are also not devil fruit related. Even if this were the case, however, I still find it very hard to believe that the story would make Imu's devil fruit itself be something as basic as arrows. Whether it's Blackbeard, Kaido, Big Mom, the Admirals, or any of One Piece's other very strongest characters, if they have a devil fruit, the rule is for their fruit to almost always be something incredibly special. It did for a long time look like the story might actually be heading in a different direction with these top tier characters, where Luffy was seemingly going to become the strongest, with his basic rubber fruit. But even this later turned out not to be true, when it was revealed to not be a rubber fruit, but a literal god fruit. It is not necessarily impossible for Imu to have the arrow fruit, but at least so far, it would make Imu a massive exception. And really, him of all characters being this exception just makes it all the more unlikely in my eyes. Imu is essentially the single most mythical figure in all of One Piece, and all the signs are pointing to his devil fruit reveal being something huge, and something comparable to the Gear 5 reveal. While there could still be something going on with both Imu and Gunko using arrows, there are other explanations besides the two being the same person. Imu could for example be simply mimicking Gunko's fighting style, as this is something devil fruit users throughout the series do. Alternatively, even though Imu's ability looks like an arrow, it could also be something completely different, such as the tail of whatever creature Imu transformed into. So, at least for me, because Gunko is confirmed to have the arrow devil fruit, I think the theory of her literally being Imu is unlikely to the point where it might as well be seen as debunked. However, there's a very important caveat to all of this. Even if Gunko isn't Imu, she could still be revealed to be another extremely important character. Essentially, many of the points I brought up earlier in this video still apply. Gunko is still clearly hiding something, and all the mysteries surrounding her are still there. I personally think she's still going to be revealed to be someone extremely important, and while it might not be Imu, it could be someone almost as important. I actually really like the theory that Gunko is someone related to Ginny or the Revolutionary Army in some other way, but I think we're being set up for a far bigger twist. The key detail the story keeps hammering home is that Gunko is not like the other celestial dragons, but someone whose role goes a lot deeper. Not only are there her numerous connections with Imu, but she literally gets to quote Whitebeard's final words about the Great War that will end the world, which is an event not even the other gods' knights know is coming. But the one thing that gives me the most pause is that one random scene of Jarl talking about there being a woman in the world even older than him, someone who would have been alive since ancient times. I still have one answer that could tie all of these mysteries surrounding Gunko together, where while not Imu, she could still be someone who's been by his side for over 800 years. I think that Gunko, like Imu, could be a survivor of the Void Century. She could have been there during the last Great War, where the reason why she's so afraid of Nika could be that she personally fought the first Joy Boy hundreds of years ago. I have two theories about who she really is, and why she may be hiding her real name. One is that she's another member of the Nerona family, where she could even literally be Imu's biological sister. Two is that she's someone even more important, and is one of the 18 unknown original monarchs who founded the world government, and therefore would be the second highest ranked celestial dragon in the whole story. This is once again something we discovered in the scene with Ivankov, where he says that the only celestial dragon who could outrank the 5 elders would have to be one of the original founders. Interestingly, this could align with a theory I made all the way back in the beginning of the year, where even before we knew her name, I speculated that Gunko could in fact be the mysterious aide we've seen in Imu's private chamber. If she is a celestial dragon who holds an even higher rank than the elders, it would make sense that Imu would give her this kind of trust, where Imu does not even allow the Gorosei into his private room, but instead contacts them through Attendant Mushi when giving them commands. If you're interested, you should click here to watch that theory, as it could actually make a lot of the things I've said in this video make even more sense. Essentially, Gunko is clearly holding a big secret, and a secret that is clearly connected to Imu, but while they may not be the same person, Gunko could still be one of the most ancient characters in all of One Piece, and the second most important person in the whole world government. Thanks to all my current victims, you clicked the join button, and in return, I took your gold and gave you cursed members only content. If you're still here, odds are you're next. Press that shiny join button, you'll get access to my hidden stash, and I'll proudly add you to the growing list of plundered civilians. Appreciate you guys for watching to the very end of the video. Take care.